Okay, a lot of geopolitical news this morning. We've talked about Hong Kong. We've talked about the news about Brexit. So how might all of that affect U.S. markets? Joining us to discuss, Ryan Payne, president of Payne Capital Management. Hey, Ryan.
Hey.
Thanks for coming on the couches. Let's talk about those global factors, especially after Jay Powell has continually sounded that note about, look, the U.S. economy is still pretty strong, some great indicators for America, U.S. consumer strong for now. The real tension and the real storms are outside the U.S., but obviously it affects us.
Yeah, it kind of does and it kind of doesn't. I think the one thing we don't focus enough on is we're very insulated as an economy in general. We only export a very small percentage of our GDP to the rest of the world. So I think to some extent that's accurate because let's face it, Europe's done terrible here relative to the U.S. and it really hasn't affected us. These tariffs we're talking about, they're a very small percentage of global GDP, U.S. GDP. So really it doesn't have a major effect on our economy.
But do you think, because for a while it seemed we were talking about to bring Brexit back into this conversation, I feel like we kept talking about will they, won't they, will they, won't they. Do you think American investors are going to start, being interested again in what's going on across the pond?
Well, they definitely haven't been, and that's actually creating a lot of great value overseas right now, Kristen. And if you look at it right now, valuations, and specifically if you look at the UK, you're looking at like 13, 14 times forward earnings, which is much cheaper than the US, and you're getting fat dividends. You're getting like 4 or 5%. Whereas you look at some of the yields on these European bonds are negative right now. So it's crazy value right now. So I hope, people start to look at it and say, hey, there's great value overseas, which eventually will happen. So I would get there now.
All right, so you're saying U.S. over international and Europe, right?
Not necessarily. I think the U.S. right now is the best game in town, but if you think longer term, you've got to look at where valuations are cheaper. So if you look at Europe, you have to look at the emerging markets, and growth rates are going to be faster than they are in the U.S. So I think you have to have a global portfolio right now if you really want to get great value.
Ryan, you sound pretty bullish on U.S. equities.
And I am.
About the R word, recession, because a lot of people sounding those fears because of the yield curves and where things are headed. Where do you stand on the idea that a recession is coming, it's going to happen, the question is just how soon, when you hear all of that sort of doom and gloom about a pending recession?
Recession? I haven't heard about a recession. Okay, bad joke. You're right. No, recession, it's unbelievable how good the economic data is. You look at our unemployment rate right now, the lowest in 50 years. Wages are going up. Americans are actually saving again, which is just shocking. And all we can hear about these recession fears. And, my mind is whenever you hear the same thing over and over, like the inverted yield curve, probably not that big a deal to worry about just because everyone's talking about it. Furthermore, even if we had a light recession, let's say it actually happened, what does that really mean in terms of, where we're going long term? I would argue it'd probably be a light recession if you had anything. And it probably wouldn't be that dramatic. It's not going to be like 2008 when the world was leveraged, or specifically the U.S. was leveraged. So I think it's a bigger worry than actually what reality is.
Ryan, we're going to get a pulse on the labor market this Friday. What are your expectations? I know we're not looking at one specific month's numbers and we're averaging out, months, but what are your thoughts on Friday's numbers?
I think it'll be more of the same, right? I think wages are going to go up, maybe around 3.1, 3.2%. We'll probably see the unemployment number still down, as low as it's been. So I think you're not going to see any surprises there. It's probably going to show the same thing we've been seeing for a very long time. America is really, really strong, and I think that message is just going to continue here.
So given that you're so optimistic on what we're seeing in the U.S. economy, what do you think the Fed is going to be doing?
I think, politically speaking, he has to lower rates, Jay Powell specifically, because let's face it, if the economy doesn't go into recession, which I don't think it will, there's no harm in lowering that rate a little bit just in the small case that we may go into recession. He's going to look foolish if he doesn't lower the rate. So I think because of political reasons, not because the economy is doing weaker, we'll probably see a quarter point decrease.
Right, there it is. Payne, economy strong.
You heard it here first.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.